Stitch Cuties, I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how easy it is to make 4 flying geese at one time. Stay tuned. Alright, to get started you want to have the right tools, so I'm going to show you what I have set up. I have an area to iron on. I like to have a Steady Betty right next to me, so that way I don't have to jump up and down to a larger iron. And I use my Steam Fast travel iron to iron right on my Steady Betty as I go. Now when I'm doing my seams, I also like to do a bit of finger pressing, or you can use one of these little seam rollers to roll your seams out before you set your seam and press it open. Then I like to have, of course, a ruler. Any kind of ruler that you like to use is great. This just happens to be a Creative Grids ruler. Any ruler you already have in your stash works. Then I like to have a spinning mat. This is the Fiskars rotary mat. It's self-healing. It is 8 inches square, and then you can see it's labeled to 7 inches total. So it's great for working with smaller flying geese, and what I'm going to show you in the demo today comes out to 2.5 inches, 2 inches by 4 inches finished, 2.5 by 4.5 with your seam allowance. And then to mark the diagonal lines that we're going to do on our fabrics that we have prepared, I'm going to use a sew line chalk pencil, and that's because I happen to be using black fabric. If you're using a lighter fabric, you can use a different kind of writing pencil, like a mechanical pencil, a Pigma pen, whatever you like to use when you're sewing. So first things that you're going to do is get your fabric to cut to the size that you need. So in this example, I am using a 5.5 inch base, which is ultimately going to be my goose. And then for the sky pieces, or the smaller triangles, I have 4 3-inch triangles. So again, 5.5 inches squared, and then 4 squares that are 3 inches. So what we're going to start by doing, I'm going to take 2 of my squares, and I'm going to place one right here in the corner. And I will tell you a tip: before I cut my fabric to the size that I know I need based on the pattern I'm working with, I starched it really well and ironed it dry. And to me, working with a really nice starched fabric makes it easier when I'm working with piecing where I need to be accurate. Then I put my second one right here, and I'm going to make sure that I draw a really accurate line from corner to corner, and I'm going to make sure it passes through my corner right here. You can also do the line on each one individually, so the choice is yours. You can see I have kind of a shorter ruler, so what I'm going to do is just go over to my surface right here, and I'm going to draw a line on the diagonal from tip to tip. Now when you're working with a chalk pencil, to me it's kind of a thick point. See if I can get that in focus. You know what the end of a pencil looks like. See, there you go. So it's kind of thick. So before I draw my line, I make sure that I have room for my lead that's going to be right at the point, and room for my lead right at the point down here. And I'm just going to draw that line. And what I'll do is go on and do that on all of them. Again, if you want to do it on top of your fabric, you can. I like to do it like this. Again, get your point right at the top. Point right here, make sure it stays, and we go right on the diagonal. Now when you're doing something like this, we're doing an oversized method, meaning at the end we're going to trim this down, but it's not insanely oversized. So things that you want to pay attention to, of course, is again, make sure you have nice starched fabric. Make sure that you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance set to be very accurate, and I would personally recommend a scant 1/4 inch seam. That's my go-to seam allowance unless my pattern states otherwise. So even when it says 1/4, I go scant. And then again, just mark this last piece. And again, pressing throughout the entire process really, in my opinion, is key. That's how Mom taught me to sew, and so of course, follow the directions of your mom, right? Okay, so now back to my piece right here. Just lay this out. Mom's in the background. She just giggled. I don't know if y'all heard her. So again, I'm going to line it up very nicely at the corners here and nicely at the corners here. So this straight line, see how perfect that is? That is a perfect diagonal line right here through the center. Now, what I would recommend doing is a couple pins just to hold this nicely in place. Then what you're going to do, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch on either side of this line. So we're gonna go 1/4 inch away. So let's jump over to the sewing machine and make that happen. So now how I have my fabric positioned, I have my drawn line, right here. And I need to be 1/4 inch on the outside. So I've put my foot down where my 1/4 inch line is gonna ride right along that drawn line and then sew 1/4 inch away. And again, I'm doing a scant 1/4 inch. So I'm gonna slow the machine down because Mom used this machine last and she's speedy. I'm not so speedy. And I'm simply gonna start. I'll speed it up just a little. And you just wanna make sure to stay right on this line. And again, when you get to a point where the fabrics overlap, make sure that your fabric isn't gonna get caught. This is a great time to have that Alex Anderson 4-in-1 tool because it helps you with the little stiletto. You could guide your fabric, but I'm just using my fingers. So now when we come to the end, there we go. I'm gonna trim that. And now we're gonna turn our fabric around and we're gonna do the same thing. So let me show you real fast. We have the drawn line right here. 1/4 inch away, we have that nice stitched line. Again, we're gonna do the same thing on the other side and get it in position and put our foot down and let's go to town sewing that straight line. This is such an easy method to make 4 flying geese in one. And again, you can make any size flying geese using this method. You'll just want to use the chart provided that tells you what size. And again, anytime you're using a pattern, you can always go backwards and calculate out what you need. There we go, right to the end. So let's go back over to our, I don't know how to make the needle come up. There we go. This is Mom's fancy machine that I usually don't use. So let's take a look up close. We have beautiful 1/4 inch on either side of that center line. So let's go trim this up. Okay, so now I'm ready to cut this right down the center. So I'm just gonna position it where I have plenty of space on my cutting mat. See, don't you love how it spins? Take my ruler, make sure it's lined up nicely, point to point. I'm not using the line on the mat at all, just letting you know. And we're gonna trim right down the middle. So let's take a look at what we have. 2 that look just like this. So what we need to do is press these so we can go to the next step. Just scoot my Steady Betty back in shot for you. And what I like to do is take my iron. I set my seam by pressing it just like so. Then I'm going to finger press this back. And I like to use my little roller guy. And then this one, to me, I just feel like I distort it a little less when I do this. It's really good for paper piecing. So just hold that like so and press. Now you don't want to like force it or anything or push and distort your fabric, right? So we're going to do that for both of these. Set your seam. There we go. In the background, I don't know if y'all heard, but Mom just turned on a heater. She's trying to heat me out of the room while I do this. And I'm pressing these. And now what we're gonna do, you have 2 remaining pieces, right? So we're gonna put one just like so. Now you wanna be really careful and make sure that this diagonal line is pointing up between these 2 pieces of sky, right? These 2 black pieces are ultimately going to be the sky portion of your block, and the pink is called the goose. So you want to make sure that this goes straight up and down. We're going to pin this, and we're going to pin it right here and turn it where my hand is happy. There we go. And we're going to repeat the same thing with this remaining one. Y'all, once you do this one time, you will be like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. And it's really fun to do. When I first started quilting a long time ago, I remember thinking flying geese were so hard. And then I learned this method and really the starching. And I was like, oh, this is a blast. So just like we did before, we're gonna sew 1/4 inch on either side of this stitch line. So let's go do it. Okay, so just like we did before, we're gonna put our fabric in place with our foot right along that 1/4 inch line. And we're going to sew straight down. Speed the machine up just a bit. And you just sew right off your fabric, and then you are going to cut. And you will turn and do the same thing from the other side of your line. You're just gonna come up where the fabric comes together, put your foot down, and get to sewing. This really is so simple. If you can sew a straight line, you can master flying geese. There we go. And trim our thread. All right, so this is what one piece should look like. Kind of like a really crazy kite that would fly maybe or something. And let's just finish off this other piece. So hopefully you're just sewing right alongside me. There we go, speed up just a little more. Straight down. And I like to, just like Mom does, I like to use the button controls on my machine. So if you see my hand, that's what it's doing. And then down right here. And so this last seam. So in just a moment, we will go back over to our Steady Betty and our cutting mat. Okay, so we need to take our pins out. We're gonna set our seam, trim it, and open it up, and then you won't believe it, but you're about to have 4 flying geese this quickly. So, just like before, take your ruler, put it right down this center line, point to point where you drew. Take a look. Boom! So we're gonna press it the right way in just a second. And go on and do this because I want to show you all 4 finished. So we took just a couple, what did we do? We sewed 2, 4, 6 straight lines, and we're gonna end up with 8 flying geese. So now what I'm gonna do, get my pressing area right into the center for you all, and get my iron from around here. Now I like to, again, set my seam. You can roll it open if you want. For quick, speedy video, I'm not gonna do that on this step. Simply gonna take my finger, press this open. Look at that. 1 flying geese. 2 flying geese. Oh my gosh, so cute, right? I'm using very contrasting fabrics for you in the video, but this would be a really fun bright quilt, wouldn't it? Flying geese number 3, and now number 4. So let's talk about trimming this. Let me show you. I'll get my trimming back over. So what we're gonna do is take 1, and what I'm gonna do is, so we have 1, 2, I'm gonna take my 2.5 inch, I'm sorry, 2 1/4 inch mark and put it right here in the center. And then I wanna make sure that I'm 1/4 inch above. And they make block lock rulers and such that make this just perfect. But what I'm doing, I have my 1/4 inch line at this point, and I have my 2 1/4 inch line at this point. So you can see I have extra fabric on the side, and then when I trim to my 4.5, you can see there's gonna be extra fabric there as well. What I'm gonna do, just rotate this so I can easily trim. And you can see you're not trimming off very much, right? So you do wanna be accurate in your seam. Get that little fuzz out of the way. And then from here, we can measure with our 2 1/4 right at that point. And now I know that my edge right here is straight because I just trimmed it. I have my 2 1/4 centered here, and I can trim right here. And then let's just turn it again. Now I know that I can line up my 2.5 and my 4.5 down here in this bottom corner. There we go, 2.5, 4.5. Do a trim. And then we just have 1 more little trim. See how handy this mat is? So now we'll be at 4.5, and then see, look, we're perfectly at the 2.5 right down here. And we're perfectly at 4.5 right here. Look how perfect that is. And we're just gonna trim this off right here. And you can see, look, my 2 1/4 that we started with, right there, perfectly in the center. Look at that. That is one absolutely perfect flying goosey geese. So I hope this tutorial helped. Again, you would trim the remaining 3 just like you did this one. And in no time at all, you have 4 perfect flying geese ready for any project you want to make. I hope this tutorial helped, and happy stitching!